Very fantastic year, very fantastic start to the year. What are your thoughts on what we're seeing? I think people are beginning to feel like political risk is something to put on the back burner right now, because bearing in mind that the Nigerian market is dominated by foreign investors at this time.
I think you pretty much said it all. The winner for this year has actually been the banks, and the positive information coming out from the AMCON deal on the 31st of December has actually caused the reaction. Yes, the political risk still abound. People are actually looking at what's happening, what's going to happen in the primaries, which are holding tomorrow. All those factors, are still there, but I guess the people are just more bullish on the banks now, and have driven the ripple effects in all the other sectors.
You covered the petroleum marketing sector, and that sector didn't do very well last year. It underperformed the market. I think it was up maybe 5% or so. What are your thoughts on where we go from here? I remember in January last year, there was a lot of talk about the regulation. 1 year has passed and it still hasn't happened. Obviously, with the elections coming up in the next few months, it's unlikely to happen before then. How do you see that sector playing out in this year?
I think just a check on what you said. The petrol market sector actually gained about 12% last year. Okay. But relatively, that there was still some sell down pressure on it. As at June, he had performed very well. He had gained close to about 42%. At the December, but towards Q3 and Q4, people were less confident. Q3 earnings, didn't come in as strong, and so there was some sell down on the sector.
What's the outlook though?
For this year, we're still a bit upbeat because we're coming off a low base. Some stocks still hold some potential. The truth is, on the growth numbers, we won't see that much growth in the numbers, and that's due to a number of factors playing out for the petroleum marketers. But yes, on the valuation perspective, it's trading at it's a sector P of just about 10 or 11 times, while the market is trading at about 16 times. I think valuation-wise, and there's still some upside, for the petroleum marketers.
You stress valuation, but there are still issues out there. I just mentioned the fact that the regulation hasn't come as planned. There's also the issue of the petroleum industry bill that hasn't been passed. There was expectation that it will happen in the fourth quarter of last year, but in January it still hasn't happened. With the elections coming on in another few months, there's a sense that it's likely not going to happen till after that. So there are still some major issues for the sector.
I think a personal take on the regulation, I don't see it happening before the elections, because if it does happen, then we would see a radical increase in prices. Running to an election year or in an election year, it's not something the government of the day would want to undertake. We currently are seeing oil prices at close to $90, and that has actually impacted on the prices or the landing cost of petroleum products. If the regulation actually takes place today, we are likely to see a 100% increase, because looking at the PPRA template, PMS, the landing cost of PMS, the expected market price of PMS is well over 120 naira, and based on the retail price, which is about 65 now, that's a 100% increase. And so I don't see the regulation happening pre-election. And post-election, I believe the government, when in power, and would want to look at it again, because the truth is the numbers on the government side are really, really very expensive. Last year it spent over 400 billion on subsidizing those products, and with high prices, oil prices this high in this year, and we would see those numbers increase. So it's just a check. It most likely would happen post election. But for the players, I think, yes, the reason why I say valuation is because on a relative basis, the growth story is really not there, because we'll still see numbers come out relatively flat, relative to the end of last year. But when you look at a market which we believe is going to be upbeat in the current year, and then you see players which are trading at 10 times, and then some players trading at about 9-8 times, and I guess at some point, investors will look at them again, and so there's some upside to be gotten from them.
Let me get your view on how long the government can continue to subsidize this sector. You just made a point about 400 billion naira being spent last year in supporting the sector, and there's a sense that how long can we continue to do this?
Personally, it's definitely not a sustainable policy. Using about 400 billion, in a particular year, when your capital expenditure is just about half of of that, it's actually not actually very wise venture for the government. So I think it's an issue which they would really look at, because it's too expensive for them to fund. As at the end of last year, the takes were that most of the subsidies were actually coming out, from in the excess crude accounts, there's been a lot of pressure on those funds now, and more people are actually looking at, what's is actually causing the depletion on those funds. So I don't think it's a policy which is sustainable, and sooner than later, we would see the government take a strong standpoint, on deregulation.
And very quickly, maybe your top 2 picks in the sector and their investment case.
I would say definitely it's always been an Wando for us. Also, and that's because it has a diversified business, a diversified business model, and so it also can hedge the risks which are apparent in the downstream sector. And then with the other player, which would pick from that sector, would also be Mobile. And Mobile, that's because yes, it has a downstream end, but it also hedges its income from its real estate, which brings in well over 1.4 billion in annual incomes. So those would be my top 2 picks for the year.